we're going to talk about the American Revolution. This is the first time we're going to see Enlightenment ideals fought for and implemented into a government. The ideals that the colonists were attacking against the British were the ideas of divine rights of kings, state control of trade. The British were dictating who the colonists could and couldn't trade with. Aristocratic privileges, meaning certain people, usually the upper class, had more rights and privileges than the lower class. And authority of a single church, meaning there was no freedom of religion. Ideas that they wanted were liberty, equality, free trade with whomever they would like, religious tolerance, freedom of religion, human rationality, democracy, and popular sovereignty, the idea that the people should have a say in their future and in their government. These are going to be ideas that we're going to see in almost all of the Atlantic revolutions. So, the American Revolution, the colonists fought against the British for independence because they believed that the British were not protecting their natural rights. We like to say that the colonists defeated the great British military. However, at this time, the British were tied up in international conflicts, especially with France and Spain. The British were tied up in European wars, especially with France, and they were more concerned with their Caribbean colonies because those were more profitable, and as we know from the sugar trade down in the Caribbean. So the 13 colonies weren't necessarily high on the British priority list. So what changed? Why did these colonies decide to rebel? Well, the British government actually gave them a good amount of freedom and autonomy in the beginning. However, they started to tighten up their control. The British government started to be more involved because the British government needed money. They needed money because they fought in the French and Indian War, which means the French and Native Americans fought against the British. This was a very expensive war, and the British fell into debt. Therefore, they imposed new taxes and tariffs on the colonies without their consent. And the colonists couldn't do anything because they had no representation. This is where we're going to start to see the phrase, no taxation without representation. So some of the taxes that were put into place that upset the colonists were the Sugar Act, which is a tax on sugar. The Stamp Act, which means every written material produced needed to have this stamp and you had to pay for the stamp. And the Tea Act, tax on tea. This led to colonial unrest. The colonists started to act out against the crown because of these taxes. They started to do things such as tarring and feathering tax collectors. We see the Boston Massacre, which is usually blamed on the British, but from what we see, the colonists actually were being hostile to the British soldiers. The Boston Tea Party. And because of all this, we see the creation of a volunteer army known as the Minutemen, because they're going to be ready in a minute's notice. All of this boiled up to the Declaration of Independence, which we have looked at. Declaration of Independence talks about inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness cannot be taken away. The social contract and the right of the people to overthrow a government if it's not protecting their natural rights. And as we looked at, or as we're going to look at the grievances, what the problems were that the colonists had with King George III. This is going to lead to the War of Independence, where the Americas are going to fight for freedom, independence, and a government that protects their natural rights. This is important with considerable aid from the French colonists. That's going to play a huge role in our relationship with France and the French Revolution. This is going to end up creating the U.S. Constitution, which put political ideas of enlightenment into practice. Ideas such as 3 branches of government, a national and state government, and checks and balances. Results of the revolution, as we know, there was actually not huge transformation. There were still social hierarchies. There was not total equality. You had to be a land-owning white male in order to vote. So it was not perfect. And still is not perfect, but hopefully we will get there. the long-term effect of the American Revolution is that it actually caused a domino effect of other revolutions to happen and inspired future revolutions and revolutionary leaders, which we'll look at throughout this unit. Thanks. Bye.